Justice Waziri, if I could have you here. Sustainability, as it is understood in popular perception, often feels like a technical or elite issue. Can only the rich afford to be sustainable? And how do we bring everyday people, from farmers to students, into this conversation to make sustainability more inclusive and make it relevant to their lives? I read this out to you because you also mentioned the fresh air from New York. And Mamdani's campaign, for instance, was about bringing dwell well into the political conversation, which we don't do. So therefore, our politics is separate. These conversations are separate, happening often in PILs and in courts. And this may also speak to your other concern, where you said that directions were not followed. There's no coordination, there's no follow-up. Is that because there is no political conversation happening around these issues?
Let me add to what Justice Oak said just now. It takes the conversation forward, some criticism about the courts, etc. When the systems don't deliver, then you go to court and ask them for relief. Justice Oak has known from his experience, and I can tell from mine, that when you ask the executive or direct them to do something, there is resistance. There is constant recalcitration. Recalcitrant, nahi karenge. I have always called it the tyranny of the indolent. Na karenge, na karne denge. Now coming back to your question, when there is a slum which is uprooted, prior to that, under certain judgments, a list is to be prepared as to who was there, how long ago. And then you are supposed to be given alternate housing. When you look at the alternate housing, how far is it from where you were? You were integrated in that society. Maybe your children were going to a local school there, your family members were working in the local somewhere, residence hall association, whatever. कुछ उनका वहाँ से आमदनी आती थी, उठा के आपने दिल्ली के एकदम कोने पे बिठा दिया, ठीक है? Those are compulsions of the state. हर जगह ज़मीन नहीं है इधर नेबरहुड में, पर आपने जहाँ बैठाया ना, वहाँ पर सड़क नहीं है, that link road is not there. बिजली नहीं है, बिजली का इंतज़ाम ही नहीं है, पानी नहीं है. So how do they settle in? How do they manage there? Okay, they've gotten land, but then they have to spend so much more money to make it habitable and get the children now into schools. Yes, there are free rides for ladies now in the city, but that is only one aspect. It saves money. Earlier it was not costing them anything by they were working in the neighborhood. They could walk there. But it takes away their time. Aage piche. Who will take care of the children when they come back from school? But the male members have to still pay for that bus fare. And so many other concomitant issues when you have to resettle somewhere else. These are challenges which a state faces, and इसका मेरे पास जवाब है नहीं. हमारी अपनी challenges होती हैं sustainable development के लिए. अब ठीक है, जमुना के बगल में बहुत सारे ऐसे अगर hutments हैं, उनको अगर हटाना है तो rehabilitation साथ में होना पड़ेगा ना पहले. अब नदी गंदी हो रही है, उसको कैसे साफ करेंगे बताइए? दिल्ली के अंदर तो ऑर्डिनरी नदी गंदी होके आती है कहीं और से. हमारी मुश्किल ये है, पराली कहीं और जल रही है, we are facing the brunt of it. So it's a city which is surrounded by so much of population. Look at the Abadi of Delhi, it's a and in this 3-4 cities around here, Noida, Gurgaon, Faridabad, Delhi, Milake. How much do you think is the population? I think about 75 million or 80 million people, if I'm not mistaken. चलिए सर, जितना भी होगा, it's a lot of people to cater for. And Delhi bears the brunt of its relative prosperity, if I may say that. So people come in. So we have to battle that also. The state government has its own problems. I don't know how to answer that question of yours. Ke मुश्किलें हैं, but you can't always blame the government for that.
Certainly,
Can't blame the government for that.
Ji. But it's true that if it's not part of the everyday discourse, then very often policies and courts and judgments often sometimes reproduce, in trying to be more environment friendly, reproduce some of those inequities that we have been seeing.
Why do people leave their cities and come here? वहाँ तो नहीं थी ना कोई आमदनी का जरिया नहीं था. हम लोग ज़्यादातर दिल्ली में जो रहते हैं, we are outsiders. कहीं और से आके बसे हैं ना. So if there was enough earnings, जरिया आमदनी थी वहाँ पर, लोग छोड़ के ना आते यहाँ पर. See that when you say about migrations, environmental,
Absolutely.
not only environmental, but so many other aspects of why people migrate to another city. There's a reason.
Absolutely.
That's a larger question. वहाँ से क्यों आते हैं? So leave it at that.
I'll ask you an easy question now. It's to do with actual law. How do India's laws and institutions and policies negotiate the relationship between progress and preservation? Do you even see them in juxtaposition? Progress and preservation, and then how do laws negotiate that?
Definitely the law attempts to negotiate that. I don't see it in juxtaposition because I think lawmaking as an exercise is class biased. There's no running away from that. I think it's a class biased exercise. It is meant to suit certain interests. You can't run away from that fact. But let me tell you one example, because we've been talking enough about Delhi and about courts and institutions that are in Delhi. For example, I'll tell you the Forest Rights Act. It's an act that came 5 decades too late. For our landless farmers who were tilling the land, or tenants who were tilling the land reform legislations came in the 50s. The Forest Rights Act, which is rough equivalent of what should have happened for land rights distribution in terms of wealth redistribution, comes about 50-60 years late.
Yeah.
And even when it came, there was much opposition to those provisions of the Forest Rights Act, which actually empowered Gram Sabhas to determine how forest and forest produce and forest related resources ought to be regulated. So the point why I'm saying this in the context of the question you asked is, there are certain communities who inherently know how to practice sustainable development. Tribal communities are one of them. They know that they are dependent on the forest because their relationship is a symbiotic one with the forest. They won't see it as one against the other. So I'm saying, if laws can be tailored to suit that purpose, where we say that people who are in a more symbiotic relationship with the forest and the environment, if decision making can be third tier, whatever, fourth tier, whatever you call it, Panchayati Raj institutions, if we can bring down decision making to a micro level, and at the same time you can have some amount of macro perspective in terms of allocation of resources, I think that's the best way to tackle it. I gave the specific example of Forest Rights Act because I think it is a legislation that is way too late in the Indian constitution.
No, and I'm glad you did, because that was missing from the conversation here. In fact, I wanted to invite Justice Oak also to talk about the Forest Rights Act, and also to sort of club that with another question. Do you believe that the Indian Constitution, as it stands today, adequately reflects the concerns of environmental justice and intergenerational equity? And if not, where might it require reinterpretation or renewed emphasis?
I'll answer the second part of the first part. Mr. Parameshwar has spoken. Second part, I think Constitution has sufficient provisions. The problem is that they have remained on paper in the book of the Constitution, because nobody wants to implement. I refer to fundamental duty of the state also. Nobody wants to really implement those provisions under the Constitution. Constitution has an entire framework. Now, the issue which you raised about the first issue, it has again a direct connection with the environment. I'll give you an illustration. There is a set of rules known as Solid Waste Management Rules 2016. And I have said in my orders also I don't think there is even a single local authority or municipal authority which has complied with those rules. Now, who gets affected? As chairperson of the Legal Services Authority and maybe as a lawyer also earlier, I had occasion to visit many rural areas or smaller towns, smaller municipalities in Maharashtra. It's a very common thing outside the limits, just inside the limits, but on the outskirts, you will find a hill of solid waste. Now, who gets affected? The people who are having agricultural lands around, people who live in shanty, they are the worst affected because that generates fires, that generates fumes. And I have seen tribals getting affected because of these hills of solid waste. There is a tribal area in Mumbai also. There are some they are actually located inside Sanjay Gandhi National Park, which is again protected by under the orders of the court. So I always say that issue of environment is not issue of elitist. Maybe in some cases, elitist people may be approaching the court because they may be finding it easy. So it's not about elitist. Every breach of environmental law, common man of this country is affected, tribals are affected, farmers are affected, and poor people are affected. This we must keep it in mind. Right,
sir. In fact, the AQI in those areas normally, I think, is similar to the AQI here now in South Delhi. AQI in industrial areas where people live, AQI in areas where there are these hazardous mountains of trash is very similar to our AQI these days. So it's
and one more thing, we are talking only about Delhi. I want to add something about Mumbai. One of the main reasons for what happens in monsoon is that we have breached laws regarding environment. At least 4 days in every monsoon, Bombay comes to standstill.
It does.
No, we are very comfortable in our houses, but 30-40% of the population of Bombay, they carry on their business by the side of the road. There are auto rickshaw drivers. There are coolies. Yes, now, for 4 to 5 days, they don't get livelihood. This all happens because we are committing breach of every single environmental law. I talked about solid waste management rules. Because we are not implementing those rules, there is a flooding in the city of Mumbai. Mm-hmm. So we have to remember this is all boils down to have-nots.
Right, sir. That you also touched upon that, Parameshwar, the statutes. And the very last question, sir. Then does it boil down to fundamental duties?
Of course, it boils down to fundamental duties. It does boil down to fundamental duties.
Yes,
I would request anybody to show me or tell me if any state, or at least I'm asking for Delhi, has any arrangement for disposal of mercury waste or lead waste. कहाँ है उसका इंतज़ाम? निकाल के कहीं कहाँ इस्तेमाल करते हैं या bury करते हैं? Where do you bury that? कोई ऐसा, do we have the rules, but has it been done ever? I'm giving you, let me share with you something. About 20 years ago when I was a lawyer, these, mounds of garbage which we have, hills of garbage in Delhi, 3 places, especially when we're going towards Chandigarh. So वो भर गया इतना आसमान तक. उसके बाद ईस्ट में होने लगा तो कहा we are generating 1800 metric tons of garbage every day, and it's going to grow exponentially in the next decade or something to 4,000, which it is possibly now. Where will we dump it? There was a suggestion, believe me, there was a suggestion. I was a part of the discussion. Let's dump it in that huge ravine we have in the south of Delhi. It is called the Neeli Jheel. Mercifully, because of Supreme Court's orders, that mining stopped near Faridabad side. We have a jheel there. That whole area is protected.
Right.
That is where the courts have intervened and protected our environment and done so much for that. If it was, as I will join the other panelists, if it was not for the courts, बड़ी मुश्किलें होती हैं हमें. And to all the environmentalists, a salute to them and all these citizens who wish to bring this forward, the issues, especially media जो highlight करती है रोज़ाना की बातें. मुश्किलों का सामना करना, bringing it forefront. I mean, we have this gentleman called Afroz Shah in Bombay, that lawyer who went down. He saaf kiya pura beach, whole city got together. One single farmer, Jadhav Payeng in Assam, he created a whole forest. We have Sundarlal Bahugana's example. शुरुआत तो हमें ही करनी पड़ेगी और हम ही करेंगे उसको. ये जद्दोजहद हमेशा रहेगी. This battle will go on. There will be development. We will keep battling. We'll keep asking the hukumat for sustainable development. Whatever little we can do in our own way, we shall continue doing that. I think that's the way to go forward.
Indeed. I think we've overshot, mostly because I was talking so much, but we will take some questions from the audience and then close it.
For the sustainable for the sustainable development of the sustainable future of India, if each one of you had a wish, it could be in a form of a legislation, an idea or a mindset, what would it be? Each one of you.
Yes. One or two.
Yes, good evening, Justice Oak. This question comes with the relation to your Constitution bench judgment in the Union Carbide case. So while that case was being decided, and of course there's been a lot of criticism with how the courts dealt with Union Carbides, could you put in a perspective from an environmental and a constitutional sense that went through your mind while dealing with the Union Carbide case when you were on the bench?
See, one thing, I have followed one discipline. While I was on the bench and after I demitted office, I refused to comment upon any case which I had dealt with. That will be most improper. It is for somebody else to criticize my approach. I can't criticize myself.
Or anybody on the bench if that's the matter, on the dais if that's the fact.
We'll get the amicus to answer.
He's amicus in many matters.
Hi, I'm Dhruv. I'm a city planner from Chennai. As a city planner navigating the system of Indian urbanism along with citizen, resident and taxpayer collectives, should we be advocating for the enforcement of a constitutional right to sustainable development, or should we be looking at it, as we get a lot of pushback from bureaucrats, from a perspective of building civic sense in citizenship within collectives?
I think that's
See, fundamental rights and fundamental duties go hand in hand. So if you want to enforce your fundamental right under Article 21 of right to live in pollution-free environment, you must perform your duty of conserving and protecting the environment. They go in hand. And there is also a duty to abide by the Constitution and to respect the ideals under the Constitution. So both the things go hand in hand.
I just had a quick comment on this because in this discussion, a number of times we've used fundamental duties. That chapter in the Constitution on fundamental duties, that portion, is part of the emergency set of amendments that came into the Constitution. A lot of people tend to forget that. And that, a lot of people tend to forget that. That's number one. Number two, the way it was introduced, it was never meant to be a fraternal idea. I would think that we should put our bag of thoughts on the idea of fraternity. The way the fundamental duties chapter came in, the way it was planned by Madam Gandhi's government, the way it was structured, was to show that we owed duties to the state. It was an inversion of what the Constitution stood for. The Constitution and the state exists for us, citizens. We don't exist for the state. So I'm saying that the constant thing that we go back to this duties, the duties chapter in the Constitution was meant for a certain thing, which according to me, should have been deleted when the emergency 44th set of amendment came. Those chapters should have gone, according to me. Rather, we should be going back to part 4, which is more distributive, and the idea of fraternity. So even when today you see bureaucrats, they will continuously tell you that please be reminded of your duties. Those duties are not towards the state. those duties are towards fellow beings. So because so much is being talked about fundamental duties, I thought I should just clarify this.
I just want to add a slightly different point of view. When it is your duty to abide by the Constitution, under the Constitution, I have a right of freedom of speech and expression. And therefore, it is my duty to protect your freedom of speech and expression also. I may not like what you may say, but it is my duty. So, in a sense, if we read those fundamental duties so that it will subserve the very object of having fundamental rights, the fundamental duties can be very useful.
And I didn't see those as mutually exclusive. You said constitutional right or a sort of what I'm calling a political discourse. I think they're quite complementary and not mutually exclusive.
He's still waiting for an answer. Somebody should take the answer. Waziri sir.
One wish. If you had one vision or one wish.
What should be the law?
मेरी भी आवाज़ सुनो. अगर हमारी आवाज़ सुन लें, especially the women who are affected by any displacement, let's hear that. What kind of India are we looking for? What are we imagining? जहाँ सबकी आवाज़ सुनी जाए. Fraternal ideas जो बात कर रहे थे अभी, जब तक सुनवाई नहीं होगी, और सुनवाई सिर्फ अदालत के सामने नहीं होती है, it's everywhere. I mean, wherever the administration is, you must have a right to be heard, and your voice should be heard. That when you have a participative governance of that kind, that's the India I think we are looking for.
And you, sir, if you had one vision?
Carrying forward what brother said, when it comes to issues of development as it is understood now in our country, whether that's a real correct concept or not, that's a different thing. Some other forum will have to debate on that. If we want sustainable development, every person affected by that so-called development must have right of hearing. And not only right of hearing, the state or state agencies must be seriously considering the objections raised to the proposed developmental activities. Unless that happens, the responsibility will remain only with the courts to enforce the fundamental, environmental laws. And now, you know the amendment to Section 15 of the Environment Protection Act. Breach of environmental law is no longer an offense. There is some kind of a penalty. So there are limitations on the court also now when it comes to implementation of the Environment Protection Act, Air Act or Water Act.
One solid reform I would like to think is get back all public resources back to the jurisdiction of the High Court. We have taken away electricity, telecommunications, airports, the most forest, NGT, the most important public resources we have taken away from the High Courts. I think all the public resources, I think water is the last remaining thing that's not been taken away from the High Courts. Get them back to the High Courts. Get back the public resources to the jurisdiction of the High Courts. I think there, each of the High Courts will be able to perform much better than 4 or 5 tribunals for the entire country.
Everyone says you know somebody by the company he keeps, and Parameshwar's turned radical this evening. First he wants to do away with fundamental duties, then he wants to nationalize all the public infrastructure. Well done. Congratulations. Thank you. Let me hand it over back to Aditi.
I would be remiss if I were not to acknowledge the presence of so many of my seniors who are here, seniors on the bench and now colleagues at the bar. Thank you.
Oh, yes, indeed.